Okay, this is the personnel sheet. It calculates headcount, salaries, taxes, workers' comp, and even much, much more. The one that comes with adaptive is a good start, but we end up adding a lot of stuff to it. I'm going to be copying and pasting some formulas in here that I'll post on the comments. But you can see they have personnel sheet with last name, first name, ID, plan or department, whether or not they get benefits, their start date, their end date, how many hours per week, a pay rate, and the per, meaning are they per hour or per year. So first thing I always do is move this up so everyone defaults to year. Whatever is on top will be the default in the sheet. Down below you'll see that they give us some good formulas already set up and ready to work. These are all tied into assumptions. They have just about everything except some vacation accruals, stuff like that. So I'm going to make a few modifications and show you how this thing works. First thing I always do though is typically, instead of last name, first name, I just call this one name, and this is title. I usually kill this ID, and I like to move plan to the front. And then the reason we do that, if I modify this sheet, I want to first of all make sure it's available everywhere, make sure that this security flag is turned on, which requires that they have a flag in their role to see this, since there's very confidential data on this sheet. And then I always like to allow editing in roll-up mode. Make sure that's turned on too. Let's save that. And let's go to planning. And we're going to go right into that personnel sheet. And I'm going to add, I usually use this sheet in roll-up mode. I'm going to add a couple rows, put in a couple people. Let's say John started in June. John works 40 hours a week, and John makes 175K. Notice the default is year that we changed. Let's save that. And now I've got one head in here. I'm going to use another sheet to now put some formulas out there. The formulas are being generated by the personnel sheet, but I want them to show up on my detailed P&L in this payroll section. So first thing I'm going to do is use this formulas tab. And formulas tab just allows me to globally distribute formulas throughout every department. I could go into each department one at a time and add a salaries formula, but this just allows me to write one formula one time and distribute it amongst the whole company. So first I pick my account, and we'll start with salaries. I tell it that I want to distribute it across the whole model, and by selecting all, it also selects the parents. And the reason I want the parents is because later, if I add another child to the US, it will automatically go get these salaries formulas that we've already built. So I'm ready to set, and I'm just going to go use my formula assistant and pick up this modeled account from the personnel sheet called salaries, I believe. There's the cum salary, not pay rate. Personnel salary. No roll-up here, and the reason I'm not using a roll-up is because this formula, once I save it, I have a couple options here. We'll talk about these later, but there are no user edits, so I just want to say save. And now I've distributed that formula amongst this whole thing. If I go back to personnel, or if I go back to that detailed P&L, sure enough, I'm already starting to see a formula here. And if I go to sales and marketing, or another department, it'll have the formula everywhere. And sure enough, you can see this formula is already here and ready to go. So I do notice that I left this guy in the US, and we need to put everybody in some sort of department. So the CEO is probably in G&A. So when I save that, go back to my detailed P&L, I should find that gentleman in G&A. This is running a little slow this morning on this free trial. But sure enough, I'm in G&A, and there's my one salary. I can actually explore that if I want. And drill into that amount, and sure enough, it shows me that's John, my CEO. Another nice thing I like to do is right-click on the row header salaries and view by plan. This will just show me, this kind of flips the model on its side or changes the X and Y axes. So now I've got salaries over on the drop down and all my departments over here. And I can see that the historicals, everyone is coming in as R&D, but now I have the ability to plan by department. That salary formula is distributed everywhere. Let's go and continue this formula stuff. So I did salaries. Let's pick taxes. It already knows I want to do everything. I've already selected all, so let's continue setting formulas. I'm going to use my formula assistant and go get some more modeled accounts. And in this case, we have several tax accounts. Sometimes I'll create one modeled account that does the addition already for me, but in this case, I'm just going to add Social Security to Medicare, FUTA, SUI. I'm going to leave workers' comp out because I have a natural account for that. I say OK and save. I'm just going to keep going because I know that I have a workers' comp one. Again, I've highlighted everything. I'm going to say set formula. Go get workers' comp from my modeled accounts. And while I'm in here, I'm just going to see a few other things. We do have another one called benefits. We're going to pull that in next. So I'm going to save that. And finally, we're going to go get those health life insurance benefits and set that. It's a modeled account because it's a modeled sheet. And the benefits are right here. And one thing we didn't look at was the assumptions for these calculations. So we're going to look at that next. In fact, I'll use another sheet while that's pulling up. And I like to flip the model back into normal mode. So I just pick corporate plan and right click on it. Now say view by account. But notice my assumption sheet is actually missing from the blue tabs. And this is actually a good lesson because by default they don't show up for every user. So I'm going to pop admin into another tab. And I want to manage my plan independent sheets, and that's what an assumption sheet is. It's plan independent. And the one I'm going to just use today is called all assumptions, and this is where I've got any assumption in the entire model will show up on this sheet. But later we do build some custom assumption sheets that might just have personnel on one or revenue and COGS assumptions on another one. And right here where it says accessibility, I want to edit that. Add myself. Apparently I have 2 users on this model. And now that I'm done and go back to any of these sheets, if I refresh, this assumption sheet shows up. So let's go look at these assumptions. Here's my all assumptions. And we can see that we've already predefined, or adaptive out of the box has already predefined kind of California tax rates, max caps. So adaptive actually does a pretty great job at forecasting personnel overhead by way of calculating the rate, determining their cum salary, whether or not they've reached a max, all the way down to workers' comp. We'll talk more about CapEx later, because I like to do my CapEx a little different than adaptive. But nonetheless, that's about done. We'll go back and check our other sheets. Just wanted to confirm that we had some assumptions in here. Let's go run through the detailed P&L. And now I've got pretty decent numbers coming in here that do kind of jive with the actuals. So the trend looks fairly normal. One of my rates might be a tad high. We can drill into why, but salaries is right on, so adaptive is calculating just about exactly the right salary for what we had there. Payroll taxes seem about right, but I am adding some health insurance where this particular client doesn't have health insurance yet. And then workers' comp, and that rate seems a bit low, so we might go modify that assumption. And that is tying the personnel sheet into the P&L. I can also just jump over into the GAAP P&L, and those numbers, since we've already tied these by dimension, you can see my forecast going forward. And that's about that. Thank you.